You think you've done everything right. You're kind. You're responsible. You try to be what everyone needs. But late at night, when no one's watching, you feel like you're disappearing. You don't recognize who you've become. And the worst part is, you can't explain why. Because no one ever told you this. It's not the pain that ruins you. It's the lies you told yourself just to survive it. This isn't a motivational speech. This is a mirror. And these are 9 truths you'll wish you knew before it was too late. Most people think healing is about learning new things. But Carl Jung knew the real work begins with unlearning the false ones. The things we've been taught about who we should be. The roles we were forced to play to earn love, stay safe, and fit in. And so we grow up, not whole, but fragmented, praising the parts that get us praise, hiding the ones that make others uncomfortable. You become the peacemaker, the achiever, the strong one, the one who never causes trouble. And in that performance, you slowly abandon your truth. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to survive society. But he discovered something profound. Beneath every mask lies what he termed the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we've learned to reject. Shadow work isn't about becoming better. It's about reclaiming the pieces of you that got buried beneath approval. The angry part, the sad part, the part that wants to say no, the part that dreams differently. These aren't flaws to fix. They're exiled parts of your soul, waiting to come home. And by the time most people realize this, they're already decades deep into a life that doesn't feel like their own. But you still have time. Pause here and take a breath. What if everything you think is wrong with you is actually just something that was never allowed to exist? You were loved for who you pretended to be. Sarah was 7 when she learned that tears made her mother uncomfortable. Not angry, just distant. So she stopped crying. She became the easy child, the one who never caused problems. 23 years later, she sits in therapy, unable to access any emotion deeper than mild irritation. I don't know how to feel, she whispers. I don't even know what I actually want. As a child, love often came with conditions. Be quiet. Be good. Be useful. Don't be too much. Don't eat too much. So you shaped yourself to earn it. You learned which parts of you got smiles, which got silence, which got punishment. But Jung warned us, when love is earned through suppression, what grows inside is not self-worth, but a deep, wordless resentment. You didn't just learn to hide parts of yourself. You learned to hate them. That anger that felt ugly, you buried it so deep, you forgot it existed. Until it started leaking out as chronic irritation, passive aggression, or depression. The neediness that felt too much. You became hyper-independent, convinced that wanting anything from anyone was weakness. The sensitivity that made others uncomfortable. You built walls so thick, you can barely feel your own heartbeat anymore. Here's what no one tells you. You weren't loved for who you really were. You were loved for how well you could disappear. And that child who learned to earn love through self-abandonment, they're still in there, still performing, still believing that their authentic self is unlovable. Your niceness was actually a trauma response. People think being nice is a virtue. But Jung understood something most miss. Chronic niceness is often a trauma response. It's not kindness. It's a strategy to avoid rejection, conflict, or abandonment. You learned to smile through discomfort, to say it's fine when it wasn't, to prioritize everyone's feelings except your own. You became so good at reading rooms, anticipating needs, managing other people's emotions, but you lost the ability to even recognize your own. Now you can't say no without guilt. You can't express a preference without anxiety. You can't take up space without apologizing. Your niceness became a prison. And the key? It was always in your pocket. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror. Your discipline was actually self-punishment. You push yourself hard, not out of purpose, but punishment. The 5 a.m. workouts, the perfect grades, the extra hours, the relentless self-improvement. Everyone praised your discipline, your drive, your commitment. But Jung would have seen through it immediately. You weren't chasing growth. You were running from the belief that you were never enough. Real discipline comes from self-love. Trauma discipline comes from self-hatred. One builds you up, the other burns you out. And no amount of success could silence that voice inside that kept whispering. If you stop performing, they'll see who you really are, and they'll leave. So you never stopped, until your body started keeping score. Anxiety, insomnia, chronic fatigue, burnout. Your shadow was trying to save you from yourself, but you called it failure instead of freedom. You confused peace with emotional numbness. You chose the quiet relationship, the stable job, the predictable life. Everyone said you were smart for avoiding drama, for being realistic, for settling down. But deep down, it wasn't peace. It was emotional hiding. You didn't feel calm. You felt invisible. You didn't feel content. You felt contained. Jung distinguished between genuine peace and what he called negative peace, the absence of conflict, but also the absence of life. You weren't living. You were managing risk, managing expectations, managing the constant fear that if you wanted too much, asked for too much, became too much, it would all disappear. So you made yourself small. You called it wisdom, but your soul called it suffocation. Your self-sabotage was your soul's rebellion. You think you're lazy or unmotivated, undisciplined, self-destructive. But what if your breakdowns were your soul revolting against a life it never consented to? The procrastination, the sudden loss of interest, the way you torpedo good things just when they're getting too comfortable. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's attempt to balance what's conscious with what's been repressed. Your shadow wasn't sabotaging you. It was saving you from the job that slowly killed your spirit, from the relationship that required you to stay small, from the version of success that demanded you sacrifice your truth. The shadow resists what doesn't serve you, and when ignored, it speaks through sabotage. Maybe it's time to listen to what it's trying to tell you. Take a moment here. What has your resistance been trying to protect you from? 6. You rejected the parts that held your power. Your anger, the fierce, protective rage that rises when you witness injustice. When someone hurts someone you love. When your boundaries are violated. When your truth is dismissed. Your sadness, the deep grief that comes with being human. The heartbreak of disappointment, loss, the recognition that life is hard and people you love suffer, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Your desire for attention, for recognition, for sex, for adventure, for more than you were told you should want, for things that weren't practical or appropriate or politically correct. Your ambition, the part of you that knows you're capable of more, that has visions that are bigger than your current life, that refuses to settle for mediocrity even when everyone around you says you should be grateful for what you have. Your wildness, the part that wants to dance, to create, to explore, to break rules, to color outside lines, to live fully instead of safely. They were labeled too much, inappropriate, ugly, selfish, destructive, unrealistic. So you buried them, sent them into exile, told them they weren't welcome in the life you were trying to build. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. What you suppress doesn't disappear. It just becomes unconscious and therefore dangerous. That anger you were never allowed to express, it didn't vanish. It leaks out as chronic resentment, passive-aggressive behavior, depression, or explosive rage at small things that don't deserve it. That grief you were told to get over, it turned into numbness, disconnection, and inability to feel joy because you'd shut down your entire emotional spectrum. That desire you learned was shameful. It became compulsive behavior, addiction, or a persistent feeling of emptiness no achievement could fill. That ambition you were taught was selfish. It became either crushing self-criticism when you didn't achieve enough, or a deep depression from living smaller than your soul could tolerate. That wildness you were told was inappropriate. It became anxiety, restlessness, a constant feeling of being trapped in your own carefully constructed life. Let me tell you about Marcus, not the people pleaser from earlier, but a different Marcus. This Marcus spent 42 years being the reasonable one, the mediator, the calm voice in every storm, the one who never lost his temper, never raised his voice, never caused a scene. He was proud of this control, Until the day he found himself in a coffee shop, screaming at a 19-year-old barista because they got his order wrong. Not just yelling, screaming, with tears streaming down his face. In front of a room full of strangers who looked at him like he'd lost his mind. When he called me that night, he said, "I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. I don't understand what just happened to me." But I understood. 42 years of suppressed anger had finally found a crack in his armor. Every time he'd swallowed his frustration, every boundary violation he'd allowed, every injustice he'd witnessed in silence, it had all been building pressure. And that pressure had to go somewhere. I think, he told me months later, after we'd done the work of integrating his shadow, I was 42 years overdue for that breakdown. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your wounded self begging for reintegration. It's every part of you that was told it was wrong for existing. Every impulse that was shamed into hiding. Every aspect of your humanity that was deemed unacceptable. And until you face it, until you invite these exiled parts back home, you'll keep attracting people and situations that mirror your original wounding. The partner who dismisses your feelings, just like your family taught you feelings were inconvenient. The boss who exploits your inability to set boundaries, just like you learned that love requires endless giving. The friends who take while you give and give, just like you discovered your worth was tied to your usefulness. You'll keep recreating the original trauma, hoping this time the outcome will be different. This time you'll be enough. This time your sacrifice will be appreciated. This time your people-pleasing will finally earn you the love you've been seeking. But it won't, because the love you're seeking can only come from one place. From you, welcoming back the parts of yourself you sent away. 7. You confuse being needed with being loved. You became indispensable. The one they call when everything falls apart. The one who remembers everyone's birthday, organizes the gatherings, holds space for everyone's problems, shows up no matter what. You became the family therapist, the office mediator, the friend who never says no. The reliable one, the helpful one, the one who's always available. And you felt good about it. Important, valuable, until you started to wonder, do they love me or do they love what I do for them? Jung taught us something most people never learn. The overfunctioner is often the most emotionally abandoned person in any system. You didn't want connection. You wanted to feel irreplaceable. Because deep down, underneath all that giving and serving and helping, was a terrified child who had learned that their existence alone wasn't enough to warrant love. You had to earn it, prove it, maintain it through constant performance. So you became useful, indispensable, the person everyone could count on. But useful is not the same as loved. Needed is not the same as wanted. And by the time you realize this, you've built an entire relational world based on transaction rather than connection. People love what you do for them. They appreciate your reliability, your selflessness, your endless availability. But do they know who you are when you're not performing these roles? When you're not useful? When you need instead of give? Do they know what you dream about when you think no one's watching? What makes you laugh until your belly hurts? What breaks your heart? What lights you up inside? Or do they only know the version of you that serves their needs? The shadow holds the part of you that wants to be loved for existing, not achieving. For being, not doing. For showing up as your messy, complicated, imperfect human self. Not as the well-oiled machine that makes everyone else's life easier. But that felt too risky, too vulnerable. Too much like the child who was told their needs were inconvenient. Their feelings were too much. Their very existence was a burden unless they could prove their worth through service. So you learned to need nothing, to want nothing, to be nothing but what others required. And you called it love, but it was just another kind of hiding. The people who truly love you don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to have it all together. They don't need you to be endlessly giving and never needing anything in return. They want you. Messy, imperfect, sometimes needy, sometimes difficult, always human you. But you've been so busy being useful, you forgot how to just be yourself. 8. You built your identity around survival strategies. Who you think you are today might be nothing more than a collection of survival strategies you developed as a child. I'm the strong one. I'm a logical one. I'm the calm one. I'm the independent one. I'm the helper. I'm the achiever. These aren't personality traits. They're roles you learn to play to navigate a world that felt unsafe for your authentic self. Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to survive society. And it's not inherently bad. We all need personas. The danger comes when you wear the mask so long, you forget there was ever a face underneath it. Let me tell you about Emma. She built her entire identity around being the strong one. In her family, in her relationships, at work. She was the rock everyone leaned on. The one who never cried, never complained, never showed weakness. She was proud of this strength. It had served her well, gotten her through difficult times, earned her respect, made her indispensable. Until the day her father died, and she realized she couldn't cry. Not at the funeral, not in private, not even when she tried to force the tears to come. I feel like there's something wrong with me, she told me. Everyone else is grieving, and I'm just empty, like I'm made of stone. But she wasn't made of stone. She had just learned so early and so completely to suppress her vulnerability that she'd lost access to her own emotional depths. The strong one wasn't her essence. It was a survival strategy, a way to stay safe in a family where weakness was punished and strength was rewarded. But what happens when the strategy outlives its usefulness? When the mask becomes so tight, it starts to suffocate the person underneath. This is the tragedy of unexamined personas. They work so well at protecting us from one kind of pain, the pain of rejection, abandonment, punishment, that we don't realize they're causing another kind of pain. The pain of living cut off from our authentic selves. Your shadow holds the person you were before you learned it wasn't safe to be them. Before you learned that certain parts of your personality were unacceptable, dangerous, inconvenient. The sensitive child before they learned sensitivity was weakness. The creative dreamer before they learned dreams were impractical. The questioning spirit before they learned compliance was safer. The emotional being before they learned feelings were inconvenient. That person didn't disappear. They're waiting in the shadow, holding everything you abandoned to fit in, to be accepted, to survive. Your spontaneity, your authenticity, your capacity for wonder, your ability to feel deeply, your natural responses that weren't filtered through what will people think. They're all still there, preserved like artifacts in the archaeological site of your unconscious, waiting for you to remember that survival is not the same as living. What version of yourself did you abandon to become acceptable? And what would it feel like to invite them back home? You waited for rock bottom to finally tell the truth. Most people only look inward when everything collapses. When a marriage that looked perfect from the outside finally implodes because you've been strangers sharing a house, not lovers sharing a life. When the career you built so carefully crumbles because you've been climbing someone else's ladder against someone else's wall. When the anxiety becomes so overwhelming you can't leave the house without having a panic attack. When the depression gets so heavy you can barely get out of bed, let alone maintain the cheerful facade you've been performing for decades. When the loneliness becomes so acute that being surrounded by people who know your persona but not your soul feels more isolating than being physically alone. When the mask finally cracks under the weight of keeping everyone else comfortable while slowly suffocating your own truth. That's when most people finally ask the questions they've been avoiding. Who am I really? What do I actually want? How did I end up in a life that feels like it belongs to someone else? But here's what Jung discovered. Healing doesn't have to start with destruction. It can start with honesty, with the courage to tell the truth about your exhaustion, your performance, your disconnection from your own desires. It can start with admitting that you've been living someone else's idea of a good life while your own dreams collect dust in the basement of your unconscious. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your anxiety isn't a character flaw. It's your psyche trying to tell you that you're living against your authentic nature. Your depression isn't weakness. It's your soul's way of saying it can't survive any more self-abandonment. Your chronic dissatisfaction isn't ingratitude. It's your inner wisdom recognizing that you're settling for a life that's too small for your spirit. Your relationship patterns aren't bad luck. They're your unconscious recreating the familiar dynamic where you have to earn love by abandoning yourself. Your work stress isn't just about a demanding job. It's about spending 8 hours a day pretending to be someone you're not. Your insomnia isn't just about caffeine or screens. It's about lying down next to a life that doesn't feel like yours and wondering how you got so far from who you really are. Your shadow is not evil. It's just a version of you that never got to speak. The one who wanted different things, felt different things, needed different things. The one who was told to be quiet so many times they learned to whisper, then to mouth words silently, then to stop speaking altogether. But they never stopped existing. They've been sending you messages through symptoms, through sabotage, through the persistent feeling that something is missing from your carefully constructed life. And maybe it's time to finally listen. What have they been trying to tell you? What have you been running from? What part of yourself have you been most afraid to meet? Jung believed that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure, that we're capable of living with more authenticity, more passion, more aliveness than we've allowed ourselves to imagine. And that power, that full spectrum humanity, lives in shadow, in all the parts of you that were too much, too intense, too real for a world built on performance and pretense. The angry part that refuses to be mistreated. The sad part that grieves what's been lost. The wild part that wants to live fully instead of safely. The needy part that wants genuine intimacy instead of useful transactions. The ambitious part that has visions bigger than your current reality. These aren't character flaws. They're the keys to your liberation. Here's a question to sit with. If you knew no one would judge you, abandon you, or punish you for being authentic, what would you do differently tomorrow? Write down the first thing that comes to mind. Don't edit it. Don't make it reasonable or practical or socially acceptable. Just write down the truth. That answer, that's your shadow speaking. That's the life you've been afraid to live. The person you've been afraid to be. And they're not going anywhere. They'll wait as long as it takes for you to be ready to come home to yourself. Because here's what no one tells you about shadow work. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been underneath, all the conditioning, all the personas, all the strategies you developed to survive a world that wasn't always safe for your authentic self. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You just need to excavate yourself. To dig through layers of should and have to and what will people think until you find the person who is buried under there. The person who knows what they want without checking if it's okay with everyone else first. Who can feel their feelings without immediately trying to fix or change or justify them. Who can take up space without apologizing. Who can say no without guilt and yes without anxiety. That person is your birthright, and they're waiting for you to remember. You don't need to throw your life away to find yourself. You don't need to abandon everything you've built. You don't need to hurt people in the name of authenticity. But you do need to stop abandoning yourself. You need to stop pretending that your needs don't matter, that your feelings are inconvenient, that your dreams are impractical, that your authentic self is too much for this world. Shadow work isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating the parts you've rejected so you can show up as a complete human being instead of a carefully curated performance. It's about learning that your sensitivity is not weakness. It's a superpower that allows you to feel deeply, connect authentically, and create beauty in a world that desperately needs more tenderness. Your anger is not ugly. It's a sacred boundary setter that knows when something is wrong and refuses to pretend otherwise. Your sadness is not depression. It's your heart's way of honoring what matters to you, of grieving what's been lost, of staying connected to the full spectrum of human experience. Your neediness is not pathological. It's your nervous system's recognition that you're a social being who requires connection, support, and interdependence to thrive. Your wildness is not irresponsible. It's your life force refusing to be contained in boxes too small for your spirit. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you actually are, not who you were shaped to be by family, society, or circumstance. It doesn't mean becoming selfish or destructive. It means becoming authentic, learning to honor both your light and your shadow, learning to express your full humanity instead of just the socially acceptable parts. It means developing what Jung called conscious choice, the ability to respond from your authentic self rather than react from your conditioning. When someone tries to manipulate you, instead of automatically people-pleasing, you can pause and ask, what do I actually want to do here? When you feel anger rising, instead of automatically suppressing it, you can ask, what is this anger trying to tell me about my boundaries? When sadness comes, instead of rushing to fix it, you can ask, what is this grief honoring? What does my heart need right now? When fear arises, instead of letting it control your choices, you can ask, is this fear protecting me from real danger, or is it protecting me from growth? This is what wholeness looks like. Not perfection, not having it all figured out, but conscious engagement with all parts of yourself. If you're here, still watching, still listening, it means something in you recognizes this truth. It means you're ready to stop surviving and start living, ready to stop performing and start being, ready to stop hiding and start healing. Not as a mask, but as a whole, complicated, beautiful human being. You'll still stumble. You'll still fall back into old patterns. The people-pleasing will sneak back in when you're stressed. The self-doubt will whisper its familiar lies when you're vulnerable. The urge to hide will resurface when you're afraid. But now you'll know why. You'll recognize the voice that tells you to shrink, to perform, to abandon yourself for others' comfort. And you'll remember there's another voice underneath it. The voice that's been waiting all this time for you to come back home. The voice that knows your worth isn't earned through performance. The voice that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. That awareness is how the healing begins. Not with dramatic gestures or radical life changes, but with small acts of self-remembering. Start with one honest conversation, one boundary, one moment of choosing your truth over others' expectations. Start with asking yourself, what do I actually want here? And then listening, really listening to whatever comes up without immediately editing it for acceptability. Start with treating your feelings as information rather than inconvenience. Your anger as boundary intelligence rather than character flaw. Your sadness as heart wisdom rather than emotional weakness. Start with remembering that you are not responsible for managing everyone else's comfort at the expense of your own truth. Your shadow has been trying to save you all along. From a life half-lived, for relationships built on pretense rather than intimacy, from the slow suicide of self-abandonment. Maybe it's time to thank it for its service, for carrying the parts of you that weren't safe to express, for preserving your authenticity even when the world demanded conformity. And then, maybe it's time to finally listen to what it's been trying to tell you. If this video stirred something inside you, don't let it fade. In the comments, share one truth you've been avoiding. Let this be the first time you say it out loud, even if your hands shake as you type it. Because healing happens in the speaking, in the witnessing, in the moment you realize you're not the only one who's been carrying this weight. You're not behind in life. You're not broken beyond repair. You're not too late to start over. You're just waking up. And everyone who's ever done this work knows, the hardest part isn't the falling apart. It's the coming back together as who you actually are. It's learning to live as an integrated human being instead of a collection of coping strategies. It's learning to love yourself not for who you pretend to be, but for who you actually are underneath all the pretending. Welcome back to yourself. The journey home is the most important one you'll ever take. If you found something real here, if this felt like a conversation you needed to have with yourself, let me know in the comments. Share what resonated. Share what scared you. Share what you're ready to stop hiding. And if you're ready to go deeper into this work of integration and authentic living, subscribe. Because this is just the beginning of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You matter, not for what you do, but for who you are. Not for how well you perform, but for how fully you exist. Remember that. Your soul is counting on it.